We are in this moment, and today we are discussing whether or not spirituality is a cope. So I've seen this in a lot of people, and I've seen this in myself, where, in life, when, my inadequacies, my shortcomings, my, my faults, they arise. I noticed that I retreat to this little space, my little spirituality space, where I want to feel better about myself, because there's people, and this is due to the conditioning of society, and this is due to how we have our minds and how we play our roles in society, and how we sort of develop this conditioning by society that we have to appear a certain way, and we have to have our image put on display for other people to look at. We gotta have materialistic possessions, and we have to have something to show in accordance to our age, right? So I found that I retreat to this space so that I can feel, I've done this in my past. I have done this in my past where, maybe certain things are brought out that have to do with my character and have to do with my personality and my identity and the character that I'm playing, right? It's like I get called out by maybe people who think they're like at a higher position and at a higher point because of what they have, because of their materialistic possessions and their occupations and their careers, that I found that it's easy to retreat to a space to make yourself feel better about yourself and to make yourself feel better about your situation and your circumstances. And it could be a spiritual retreat, like, oh, I'm so spiritual, I'm so conscious, I'm engaging in all of these high level habits. I've went a year without relapsing on retention. This person makes like 8 figures or 10 figures, and they're the same age as me, but I'm doing better than they are. They think they're doing better than me, right? It's a game. It's a back and forth game that a lot of us tend to play when we use our minds, when we are in our minds, and we're playing in society, and we're playing our roles in society, that we like to, we retreat to our little space so that we can feel better about maybe our inadequacies, or maybe our shortcomings, or maybe our sort of our errors that we make, right? And a lot of people do this with religion. They do this with, materialistic possessions, and, maybe how much they make a year, spirituality, maybe their gains, or their spiritual gains, or what they drive, or what their bank account looks like, so they sort of retreat to that space so they can feel better about themselves, and they can feel better about their situation and their circumstances, and they can feel better about their situation, because maybe they get called out in a certain light because of what society standards are and what society's conditioning is, that it automatically makes people want to think in a certain way and move in a certain direction, right? And I've also seen this with people who retreat to, their religion and their religious practices. Everything can be used as a cope. Everything can be used as a cope. Religion can be the idea of everything being used as a cope in itself can be a cope. Everything can be used as a cope. The people who say spirituality is a cope can be the same people who are coping because they don't want to accept spirituality, and maybe they don't agree, maybe they don't understand it, so they are against it or they dismiss it. So anything can be used as a cope. And, whether that's religion, whether that's spirituality, anything in general. And I've seen a lot of people, engage in, subscribe to religion and, engage in religious practices so that they can feel kind of better about themselves and so that they can kind of navigate through their life, through their situation. They use it as a means to kind of retreat because maybe they don't really know. Maybe they feel very lost. Maybe they feel very tired and they don't know. They need answers. They don't know what's going on. They don't know. They need some clarity. They feel like they need some answers. So they go to religion or spirituality to try and seek some answers. Or maybe they're lost, or maybe they're tired, or maybe they are in a dark space, in a funk or a dark cloud. But I'd say that, that could be a cope. Anything can really be used as a cope or a coping mechanism. It's really easy, just because of, the world it can be a very dark place to try and navigate through, especially if you're a very sensitive person, you're a very conscious person, you're a very aware person. But the world can be a very dark place to try and navigate through, especially when you're from a planet you feel like you're not from. You feel like you're not from here. Maybe you're a person with many, sensitivity problems, or you have a sensitive nervous system, or you're just a very sensitive individual in general, right? Like, the world can be a very treacherous and dark place to try and navigate through, especially, this Western world, this Western civilization. So, we have all of these things for us to retreat to, all of these spaces that either get created for us or we create for ourselves to retreat to, in times of adversity, of times of distress, of times, of hardship. And that's really what coping is. We either create the space or the space is already created for us to run in and to drown ourselves into for the time being, just so that we can get by in life, because life can be very hard and life can be very dark and life can be very treacherous, and a lot of us, we don't want to face our darkness. And it's easier for us to run away from our darkness than to face our darkness. So that's why a lot of people, they go straight to religion, they subscribe to religion or spirituality and so on, because they have, maybe they have a lot of darkness inside, and they just think, subscribing to such a thing will get rid of all of their darkness and get, rid of all of their problems and fix their situation. It's almost like a cop-out, these people, and I've seen it I've seen a lot of this in people, like personally, where, they subscribe to religion because maybe they are, or whatever, spirituality, it doesn't really matter. But they subscribe to it because they are tired, they are lost, or they have this darkness inside that they are trying to kind of beat around the bush with. They're not really ready to fully face themselves. So, they subscribe to whatever religion as a way to maybe cope. And then later on, later down the road, throughout their journey, throughout their development, because we develop all throughout our lives, there's a shift that goes on within them where they're able to either face their darkness, they're ready to face themselves, right? And they face themselves, and they change, they develop, and then they look back as to why they're doing what they're doing still, why they're in that religion that they subscribe to and they're still doing, and this was years ago, or these spiritual beliefs or practices. They're like, why? They look back in reflection as to why they're still doing this, like and they don't resonate with it anymore. They don't resonate with it anymore. So they then unsubscribe to the religion or these practices or spirituality because that shift was made, and then it's a click within themselves. And they're like, why am I doing this? This doesn't resonate, right? It resonated before, but because it did before, well, now it isn't going to resonate. So they unsubscribe to it. It doesn't resonate with them. They don't click with it. They don't understand it, and they don't agree with it anymore, and it doesn't sit with them. So they let go of it. And then they'll find something else to maybe identify with or to latch onto. And it's kind of why you shouldn't identify with your religion. A lot of people, it's really difficult, I know, because there's a lot of content creators or YouTubers who identify with their religion, and they're like these spiritual YouTubers, and it's like a part of their lifestyle, and they make it a part of their identity, and they make it a part of their whole identity and egos. And then they post it all over the internet, they post it all over the world to see, and they're like, look at me, and then they're saying what they have to say to the world. And the mind is just so sticky. It can be very problematic, and it can really detract from the experience, from what you're actually doing, from the positive things that you're receiving out of the religion, if you're religious, the spirituality, if you're spiritual, or the practices that you partake in or you engage with. This can really detract from it because the mind is so sticky. When you identify with what you're doing, the mind loves like noise. This is kind of like noise for the mind, for the ego. This is like ego food for the ego, because the mind is so sticky, and it's always going to try to find its way to bleed through and to wreak havoc, in any realm that it can find and enter, the spiritual realm, the not so spiritual realm, the religious realm, whatever realm that the mind can find, it's going to try and wreak havoc. It's going to try and find a way to bleed through everything and to wreak some sort of havoc, to where you just start identifying with everything, you start walking with everything you do. And all of these things are here for a reason: religion, spirituality, otherwise they wouldn't exist. So you start to walk with everything you do, you start to identify, and the mind loves that, the ego loves that. It's like, yes, you engage in these spiritual practices or these religious practices. That's what you do now. That's how you need to portray yourself, and you need to be seen now in this light now, in front of the whole world, in front of YouTube and the internet and the and you start to kind of like lose maybe why you're doing what you're doing in the first place. Because you get maybe so involved with it, you become so identified with it, and then it becomes kind of like a worldly sort of fixture or fixation, So, or you do what you do because you don't really want to truly face yourself. You don't really want to truly, we're so good at, you don't really want to truly face what you need to face and work on the areas of your life you need to work on, and really let go of the things you need to let go so that you can grow and evolve and change. Like, we are so good at running away from our darkness, we are so good at running away from our problems that we never can. It's like we just drown ourselves in distraction without knowing, so that we can never focus in the areas of our life that we need to focus on. So then we're like, oh, religion. Wow, I'm gonna go do that. I'm gonna go subscribe to religion. I'm gonna do all these things, so I'll be fine. You know, it's like a cop-out. You know, I'll be saved. My life will be amazing. All my darkness will go away. And that's it. I won that life, and I'm done. You know, I'm a new person. You know, I'm reborn. You know, I'm a born again Christian, or a born again whatever. It's over. I won. I'm done. And that's kind of what people like to retreat to, because maybe they you know, on a subconscious level, on a deeper level, they don't want to face themselves. They don't want to face the side of themselves that they need to face and confront. They don't want to confront themselves. They don't want to confront their darkness, and they don't want to work in the areas that really need to be worked on. So they'll cling onto these ideas, what you know, religion, spirituality, and as a coping mechanism. Or they do it because I think that was it. I mean, there's so many reasons as to why people do what they do, you know, but we're just, like I said, we're so good at running away from ourselves that we can never really see what we're running away from. So I think, and there's really no such thing as a being born again Christian or a born again. I mean, there is. This terminology exists. It's very present. But I'm talking about, you can never reborn yourself. There's no such thing. It's impossible. There's always going to be new levels to reach. There's always going to be room to improve in. There's always going to be ways you can evolve. There's always going to be things you can work upon. You can change within yourself. And you can, you know, focus on and let go of these worldly attachments that create a level of constraint within you, or things you need to do to kind of, you know, revere that darkness that's inside of you, whether that's spiritual practices, maybe a relationship you need to be in, where the other person shows up, brings your darkness out, and you do the same for them. You mirror that other person. Or maybe just living wisdom or experiences. So, but there's always levels to this. There's no one and you're done awakening. There's no rebirthing yourself and that's it, you're done. Because there is an infinite amount of wisdom and information to be learned. And there's infinite levels to this experience. You know, evolution is evolution. Like, you can't escape the experience. So let me know what you guys think of that take. I think it's really fun. We're at 19. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.